I'm Rachel, and my lesson plan today will be on moon phases. So you can see my Virginia SOLs and the ISTE standards over here on the left. You can read those yourself. But my objectives are for a 6th grade science class, and they are students will explain and define how the phases of the moon are created. Students will identify the names of the moon phases and when they occur, and students will be able to demonstrate and describe how the phases of the moon occur. At the beginning of my lesson, I would start off with a raft where the students would have to imagine that they are astronomers working for NASA and that they were out in the field taking photos of a solar eclipse that is about to take place. They would pretend that their supervisor, 7-year-old child, is asking them what is happening, and they would have to quickly describe what is happening when a solar eclipse takes place so that they have time to capture the event with their camera and also impress their boss by teaching their son or daughter the correct information about what's occurring. So this raft is kind of a review of my first lesson plan, which I'm not presenting in this slideshow, but the first lesson plan was on eclipses, whereas the second lesson plan is on moon phases. So with this raft, it's kind of summarizing the first lesson plan and making the students think about terms such as rotation, revolution, and shadows, and the relationship between the sun and the moon, because they're going to be using those terms and those relationships when they learn about moon phases. So after students complete the raft and they start thinking about the relationship between the sun and the moon, I would start a short clip on moon phases using BrainPop on the smartboard. And the video is really fast, but it gives you the gist of how moon phases occur. And then after the video, we would do a video review and using a styrofoam sphere, as you can see in the picture here, and a pencil and a bright light, the students and myself would pretend that we're the Earth and then hold out the moon, and then you could be able to see the different phases of the moon that way, which is very similar to what they did in the BrainPop video. After we do that a few times, then we can kind of transition over to more technology. And using Google Earth, students can go on the smartboard or the classroom iPads or their iPhones or whatever they have and use the Google Earth app to kind of manipulate the Earth and the moon and play and see what kind of different phases they can come up with there. Also, a few students, they'll be able to share their ideas if they want with the class and go over easy ways to remember important vocabulary that are associated with the moon phases, such as the crescents look like C's and the gibbous, GIB equals BIG, waxing, the X is extra, so it's getting bigger, and then waning equals negative or getting smaller. After they do those two activities, they can do the lunar cycle challenge. The students can practice the lunar cycle on their iPad again or their iPhone. It's a quick game with the link here, and I could do that with a QR code. And they pretty much have to go in and they look at the lunar cycle and they have to pick which phase would fit into the different spots. So they practice it and they can go at their own pace with that one. After students complete the lunar cycle challenge, they will go on to Padlet and post something that they learned about the moon phases that day during that lesson. And down here on the bottom left, you can see an example of what that would look like. So they just have to come up with any interesting facts that they found interesting or that really stuck with them or something they didn't know before and post them onto that board where the whole class would be able to see it on the smartboard. Then we would discuss the different responses in class and, add anything to it afterwards. The next would be their homework, which has 2 parts. So first part would be a online scavenger hunt for Galileo. So I have a list of questions that the students would have to pair up or group with and use the computers inside the classroom during the last 15 minutes of class. And they would collaborate and look online to find all the answers to all the questions. Then they would do a point of view guide and pretend that they are writing to Galileo from the future. So After class, they'll go home individually and observe a moon just like Galileo did. Then they would illustrate their observations, kind of like Galileo did. Over here, you can see a picture. They would label it, and then they would label the phase of the moon that was before and what the phase will be after the current phase. The students will also have to write out their observations and describe in 3 different phases in their own words, just as they were describing it to Galileo way back in the day. Students will also have to come up with at least one question about moon phases that they have for Galileo, and then we'll share those during class the next time. So for differentiation, I tried to cover all of the bases with visual, auditory, and tactile. So the videos, the Google Earth activities, the model activities, the lunar cycle challenge activities, those are all visual as well as auditory, and tactile was pretty much all of those as well, including the Padlet and the model moon phase activity. Some differentiated activities that were for everybody. Students will have the opportunity to explore different moon phases scenarios using the Google Earth app, so that's at their own pace and wherever they want to go. They will also be able to practice the phases via the lunar cycle challenge, which again is at their own pace. And then they also have a lot of collaboration where they will be grouped up for the homework assignment, and they also are grouped up in working on the Padlet to share their new discovery. So for my formative assessments, the raft would be considered a pre-assessment as it shows the understanding of prior learning on how eclipses occur and the application in the real world. Also, the video review and those activities would be considered a formative assessment, as I would be walking around and checking for understanding through all the students throughout those activities. The lunar cycle challenge and review would be a post-assessment or post-formative assessment to demonstrate the knowledge of the moon phases and their positions. And then the Padlet activity would also demonstrate new concepts acquired during the lesson. The summative assessment would be the homework, which pretty much wraps up everything that we learned within that lesson and applies it to a real world scenario or a scenario outside of the classroom. So for my reflection, there are a gajillion different ways that you could teach the moon phases. You can use different videos, no videos, more interactive tools like Brain Pop, more computer games, more hands-on games within the classroom. You could do a bingo with the moon phases. You could do a Jeopardy. You could definitely do more reading of trade books or articles before class starts or for homework or during the class. One thing that we did in one of our last classes that I really liked was using vocabulary at the beginning of class and having students group up and come up with their own story using those vocabulary words. So I thought maybe they could do something like that as well. But again, there's tons of different ways you could do this, and I know I could change it and make it completely different based on the classroom that I have. It really just depends on the students that are in that classroom. Sometimes it would work for one period where some activities might not work for others. But that's my lesson. I hope you like it.